This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Dawn and Great Rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest today is someone that I have had occasion to perform with. I've also had occasion to have him on other shows, including the television show that airs in Northern Summit County. But today he is on 95.9 FM WOVU, and it is my absolute pleasure to have him. He is a percussionist par excellence. He is one of Cleveland's shining musicians, but he is also someone who is into education when it comes to music. He has a fantastic concept called emotional intelligence, and we're going to talk about that as well as his book, The Book of Eli, Elevating Your Life Through Emotional Intelligence. Welcome to Open Door, Mr. Elijah Gilmore. Elijah, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yes, I really appreciate you being here. And I know what it's like to have a book and want to get the word out. And we know right now it's just in the form of an ebook, but you're working on some things to get it to the next level. And when it does, we will amplify it then as well. So why don't we start with the Elijah Gilmore story for those who don't know who you are? And I don't know why they wouldn't, but given your track record, let's get started with your start. Started here in music in Cleveland or somewhere else?
I'm from Cleveland and got my start here in Cleveland.
Okay. So what was your entree into music and percussion specifically?
Well, I started my love and journey for drumming and percussion at an early age. About maybe 3 is when I would rip off the hands in church and try to mimic the drummer of the church, and I would beat on the pots and pans. And my family eventually invested in me a small drum set.
3 years old, you picked it up.
Yep.
Wow. Funny thing, I saw a video the other day of a toddler that was making beats with his mouth, and he was also making beats with something that looked like a drum set. So, that's a sign to me that your love for percussion actually may have come from another lifetime. It was already in you. It was coming out when you were such a small age. So from the age of 3, and I think that would probably also explain why you are proficient as you are. Just thinking about some guy named Eldrick. You might know him as Tiger Woods.
Yes, sir.
And he picked up a golf club at the age of 3. And I think there's another common thread. He's a Capricorn, and so are you. Interesting. Okay. So age of 3,
very interesting.
You pick up the drums, and then you get to school, and then what happens?
Well, I often would get in trouble for beating and making, beats in the classroom, not paying attention, or I would be practicing in the music room and not going to class. So it sort of sometimes would get me in trouble. I remember I started playing in clubs and bars at the age of 16. They would tell me, "Hey, Elijah, just be quiet." So they won't know my age. Play, and they would pay me. They would take me outside and pay me. I also started doing touring around that age as well. And my parents would say, "Have them home, by Monday," and they would take me out on the weekends. And, so I consider myself blessed to be able to have the experiences, to be able to have those experiences And even to have the parents that I had, my mom always told us, whatever you believe, you can conceive it, and she would even tell us you could be the next president. And that was before Barack Obama. So I kind of took that to heart and ran with it. So remember my mom taking me to Michael Jackson's concert, and she didn't really have the money to get us front row seats, but she had the money to get us some seats off to the side of the back of the stage. So you could see Michael Jackson's back, and that was it, until he did his spins. But I had a real good view on a drummer, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I never doubted that I would pull it off, because again, my mom taught us, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Just figure out what you want to do.
It sounds like drumming for you was an obsession of sorts. It was something that you wanted to do all the time, and I think that also explains your proficiency as well. This is a Cleveland story, so who were you performing with? Not telling on anybody, but who were you performing with at the age of 16?
I was touring with a local group called Smooth Approach, and they at one point had some hits that were charted on Billboard, and I got my first touring experiences with them.
Okay, Smooth Approach. Did they ever do anything at Woodhill Park when they were having those summer festivals?
They could have. My big bro, Jeff Roberson, who was one of the leaders of the group, he took me under his wing. And even my big brother, Eric Troy, who played bass and guitar with the group, was another big bro who took me under his wing and kind of guided me along the way before I started doing music full-time professionally.
Okay. Eric Troy. I don't want to use disparaging remarks, because the first word that comes to mind is he is a beast. I mean, Eric is phenomenal. His range on the instrument and his composition skills. I mean, he's a phenomenal musician. So quite the person to have as a Jegna.
Absolutely. I'm very grateful for our brotherhood. My brotherhood with both of them. Mm-hmm. Jeff taught me a lot about the business and about production. And that allowed me to tap into the producer side of myself and, the composer side of myself.
Yes. So I'm going to rewind a little bit. You talked about being that person in school where you were perhaps distracted by your obsession. And then you have this concept called emotional intelligence. And so I'm just wondering, based on what you know now, what do you think? And I know this is putting the cart ahead of the horse because we're going to talk about it. But what do you think could have been done differently for you as a student coming up, knowing what you know now?
On my end, on the education system end.
On the education system end. I know it's a loaded question. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's okay. I think that we have to realize that everybody learns differently. So, you can't just have this cookie cutter way of teaching everybody the same way, because we all learn differently. And if you want to get the best out of teaching, you have to be open to having different teaching styles for different students who learn differently. So that's one big thing that I can say. And, my teachers will always say, yeah, he's smart. We can't really get through to him, we just need him to apply himself a little more. But that's, in hindsight, looking back, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. So I'll let you answer the other part of the question. What do you think you could have done better?
I know what I could do better. I'm just wondering if I would have the emotional intelligence coping skills at that age, since they weren't teaching it to us, which is one of the reasons I started the Tribe of Eli organization, or the Tribe of Eli movement, because they didn't teach us these coping skills and, how to manage life and different things like that. So if I would have had the coping skills, I think that I would have been able to handle things in a more productive way. So I don't know, without those coping skills, if anything would have been different on my end.
Okay. So I know music was important to you as you were coming through the educational process. As you were going to school, what did you imagine yourself doing after you got out?
That's a great question. I never even wanted to finish school. Early on in school, I realized this is what I want to do. And I would tell my parents, can I quit? Can I drop out? I know what I want to do and I know what it takes, and I'm not interested in going to school any longer. But they encouraged me to stay in school and even encouraged me to go off to college. But that was never, I knew pretty early on what I wanted to do. I would see even drum artists, such as Tony Williams and, Jack DeJohnette and, Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa. And I would say, that's what I want to do. I was just like really focused, like this is what I want to do. And I just believed that I could pull it off. And if I just stuck with it, I would go to libraries and study how to make a living as a musician. Like I literally would go to the library and get books on, when I was younger, how to be a professional musician. Then I would talk to older musicians who were actually doing it and ask them questions, and they would mentor me. So it wasn't anything that I had to question, like, well, maybe if I don't become a professional musician, maybe I could be, a lawyer or doctor or anything like that. It was like, no, this is what I'm going to do.
What did your parents want you to do?
That's another great question. I don't think they wanted me to be a musician. I know they're proud of me now, but I think they looked at it more as, this is something, a hobby that you enjoy doing, but, there's more in you. You could be, a preacher, or you could be a doctor. They just didn't really. And I think some of that has to do with, too, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, versus if I grew up in L.A. or New York, maybe my parents would have had a different outlook on it, because you can see so many musicians thriving and making a full-time living at it. But living in Cleveland, I think they were just concerned for me, because, you hear all the horror stories of starving musicians, starving artists. And I think they didn't want that for me. However, because again, my mom taught us that whatever you want to be, you can achieve it if you believe it. I just was like, I just got to figure this out.
Okay.
I'm going to figure it out.
I don't want to say that you made her eat her words, but we're glad that you took the direction that you took. You're listening to Open Door. Yes, indeed. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Cleveland's urban alternative. I'm having a conversation with percussionist and educator Elijah Gilmore. We'll be right back after this.
Hi guys, I'm Ella May.
What's going on? This is Drippers.
Hi, my name is Jill Scott.
We are Cleveland's urban alternative. This is WOVU 95.9 FM.
Attention listeners, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, is now streaming on iHeart Radio. We are the same community radio station with the same mission. Now with another way to bring you the content you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can still find us on WOVU.org and still listen to us anywhere on the free WOVU mobile app. Those are not going away, but you can also find us on iHeart.com and on the free iHeart Radio mobile app. However you choose to listen, keep it locked for the latest content as we continue to provide a platform for you, the best audience in the land, right here on WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
At CMSD, we believe in creating access to services, programs, and opportunities. Every day, we strive to provide innovative learning experiences where passions lead to career paths. From trade education to early college courses, the possibilities are profound, empowering every scholar to discover their path and achieve their dreams. The future of CMSD starts here.
This message has been brought to you by Cleveland Metropolitan School District and WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, Burton Bell Carr Community Radio.
Hi guys, I'm Ella May.
What's going on? This is Drippers.
Hi, my name is Jill Scott.
We are Cleveland's Urban Alternative. This is WOVU 95.9 FM.
We're back. Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with percussionist and educator Elijah Gilmore, who has, by the way, been doing shows at Larchmere Arts with a phenomenal singer named Gloria Cummings-Jones. Elijah is performing with Ed Ridley, who is a veteran of the piano, and Mr. Brad McGee, who was a master bassist. And I have to tell you, Elijah, it's just sweet music to hear you guys on stage playing what you play, hearing Gloria sing, and the other singers who are coming to participate. So I thank you for being a part of that, and I tip my hat to Gloria for making such a great thing happen at Larchmere Arts. So before we took the break, we were talking about you being encouraged by your parents to dream big. You can do anything that you want to do, but they didn't want you to become a musician.
Yep.
But it was what you wanted to do. Obviously, it was important to you because you spent so much energy doing it. And you got an education. Did you take the college route, or did you just say, okay, I'm going to be a musician and dedicate yourself to it?
So I eventually went to college. So, I would sit in the basement and practice drums while my friends were playing outside. And, now when I go back to my neighborhood, some of the people from the area, they kind of get teary-eyed, like, we knew you were going to make it. But, my parents, of course, they wanted me to be able to take care of myself. So I can remember Pops coming down and saying, hey, so what are you going to do today for work? Meaning, are you going to go out and do some interviews? I'm like, I'm working towards what I'm going to do. And he's like, that's not bringing anybody. And I would actually get kicked out the house. They would take my key and say, look, you can't sit and play drums all day. You need to get out here and look for a job. And, I would be on the corner with my drumsticks with the different thugs or whatever. And they would say, hey man, you're going to make it, bro. We can hear you. You got something. Keep doing it. So it's interesting. But I know, again, my parents were just trying to protect me, look out for me, make sure that I can support myself. But it was kind of challenging because if you know what you want to do and then, you don't really have the support as you would want. And they were very supportive of the actual gift because they brought me my first drum set, and who wants to buy a drum set and hear drums all day? So they were supportive in that way. It just was like, we didn't do this so you can make this a career, though.
They did it to give you something to do. They didn't necessarily give it to you so you could have a career as a drummer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's funny that we're having this conversation right now, Elijah, because I was just thinking about my own musicianship and thinking about my father. I did a show at Rudy's last night, and it was my father's birthday, and I was just remembering him. And I was wearing his tie, and I was wearing his hat. And last night I thought about that piano that was in our living room in Savannah, Georgia. That piano went from Savannah, Georgia to Naha, Okinawa, Japan. I don't know if it made it back to the United States, but My dad played a little bit, but he didn't play a lot. I think maybe in life I heard my dad play maybe 3 or 4 times that I can remember. But it was almost as though he was living vicariously through me. And he bought that instrument, and it was there so I could get that start. And I can remember being on the campus, and while everybody was at the party, I was in a room in my dorm playing the piano. And my obsession wasn't, well, I don't know. I won't necessarily say it was an obsession, but it was like every time I had a chance to put my hands on a piano, I did. So I could be visiting somebody and they'd have a piano and I'd have to play it. Or I would go to my grandmother's church and the piano was there. I had to play it. So I so relate to just wanting to be connected to that instrument and just knowing that it was something that you had to do regardless of the circumstances. And I think one of the ways that parents injure their children is that idea that we got to teach them to go get a job, and we don't encourage them to pursue their passions because we have that whole idea of a starving artist in the forefront of our minds, and we don't look at that situation and say, well, you know, all artists don't have to starve. Some of them actually do make money. I'm thinking about somebody like Herbie Hancock. I mean, Herbie does a concert and it's $125,000. You know, so
well, this is the thing that people have to realize. Like you said, you know, you don't have to be Michael Jackson to be doing really good like a Herbie Hancock. In addition to that, I've learned that most musicians are not superstars or starving artists. Most artists fall somewhere in between. You know, they're able to make a good living. They have their following, you know, and you have your few that may be, you know, starving artists or superstars. But I think like a lot of people fall in between.
Yeah, so that in between means that you might be teaching music at a school during the day and doing gigs at night or doing gigs on the weekend. So, yeah, I know there's a lot in terms of the meat in between the two slices of the bun, so to speak. And, yeah. But, you know, I think the other thing, though, and I'm really happy to have this conversation, is that we have to elevate, just thinking of the title of your book, we have to elevate the station of musicians in our society. Because in many cases, musicians are taken for granted. You know, sometimes it's like, oh, we'd love to have live music, but we don't necessarily feel like we have to pay for it or we need to pay for it because there are musicians who just want to play. And I think, you know, the fact that they're willing to exploit us that way really doesn't demonstrate a significant embracing of the value that we provide to society. What are your thoughts about that?
Now, that's a loaded one. This is the reason why the musician union was invented, to protect musicians. And what I heard at one point, you couldn't play at certain clubs or certain theaters unless you were in the union, and that those clubs and venues would not hire you unless you were in the union. So that was like the middle ground by them partnering with these different venues. They were saying, hey, we're going to handle your entertainment for you, and we're going to ensure a certain level of quality and professionalism, but sign with us that, you know, you're only going to use our musicians. And that worked for a minute. And then I guess over time things evolved, and there's still places that won't allow you to perform somewhere unless you're in the union. But there was one point where they really had it on lock to protect the musicians. So the question now is, what is the answer for modern day musicians, for the modern music industry? What are some solutions or some tools we can use to protect the musicians? One thing I noticed people are doing now, as far as like people who are like recording artists, instead of allowing record labels to, take advantage and take all of their money or their masters, a lot of musicians are becoming independent, having their own production companies, and they'll say, hey, if you want my music, you can only get it on my website. However, if you're trying to get your music out here on a broader level, it's to your advantage in the beginning to take advantage of, whatever major streaming sites you can be a part of until you get your following to a certain level where you can just say, all right, you can only get my music here. But it's kind of bad because we thought, like, in musicians becoming more independent, that we finally made it. The labels can't take advantage of us. But yeah, if you're on iHeart, if you're on Apple Music, they're still taking the bulk of the money. So it's almost like, I believe if we can get someone to advocate for us, like, maybe some type of entertainment lawyer to come up with some laws and that will protect the artists from predatory deals and protect the artists from, venues not taking care of us. That's probably our best bet. And then I heard from a good friend of mine, another thing that we could do is pass some laws. In addition to, I know that sounded kind of, let me not confuse anybody. We can get a lawyer to pass some laws for us, but we can also get together as a music community to get certain funding, still through the judicial, through the
legislative.
There you go. Still through that community to bring in money to support the arts and supports the art community. So I think probably we would need to do both. Find somebody to advocate for us to pass laws, and also as a music community come together from the legislative side to get funding for the artist community as well.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is that it's a combination of legislation and financial support, which is really what makes sense at this point. And I will also point out with respect to unions, the unions were a good thing and a bad thing. The issue with the unions was everybody wasn't able to get in the union, and the union was used as a tool of discrimination to have some folks on the outside looking in, not getting the benefit of the union. So, if you look at a city like Cleveland, I would venture to say most of the musicians who are performing in here and there, all these different clubs and whatnot, they're not in the union. So they don't get that union protection. But then you might have someone who's in the Cleveland Orchestra or, other reputable, so to speak, organizations, music organizations. They get union support and they get the benefit of somebody doing that advocacy so that they don't have to accept substandard wages. So there's a lot to pack or unpack about that. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. But then we're also going to shift to this fantastic book that you have written, and we're going to do that when we return. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on Cleveland's Urban Alternative. Back after this.
WOVU 95.9 FM, Cleveland's Urban Alternative.
WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station, will forever be a part of American culture. During this time, WOVU 95.9 FM has helped shape and define Cleveland and vicinity culture. Some claim that the wireless digital era, with its accompanying social media and on-demand personalized media content, has rendered local broadcast radio irrelevant. That's nonsense. In fact, as evidence suggests that some digital media may be fracturing the social fabric and creating bigger spaces between us, WOVU 95.9 FM radio is more vital to our neighborhoods than ever before. Increasingly, the digital space seems to be haunted by fake news, bots, trolls, and hackers who wish to deceive, divide, and exploit us. WOVU 95.9 FM radio provides local narratives, provides credible news and information, and speaks with a united voice and positive goals. There are no bandwidth charges, fees, or plans required to access it. Listening to radio is anonymous. No one tracks you or sells your information. We are a free, transparent media source with a visible physical presence in the community and real personalities behind the microphones. We even have a landline for you to call us. WOVU 95.9, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station, has proven to be a credible voice throughout Cleveland and vicinity, and people will continue to know and trust the information we share daily. WOVU 95.9 FM, for us, by us.
Cleveland's urban alternative.
What's up? My name is Her.
Kendrick Lamar.
This is SZA. Hey, it's Janae Aiko.
This is WOVU 95.9 FM.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with percussionist and educator Elijah Gilmore. Before we concluded the last segment, we were just talking about music unions in this city and other places, and just thinking about the history of unions. You know, it wasn't just relegated to music. You know, you have trade unions, same thing, you know, and it was the white guys that were getting a job and the brothers that were praying that they could get in, but that the reason that the union existed was to protect the white worker and not necessarily the black worker. I won't say that that is the case here in Cleveland with respect to our musicians union, because black and white in the union, and, you know, folks in the union get the blessing of being in the union. But once again, not everyone is in it. And I like your idea about, you know, musicians organizing, because I think one of the things that needs to happen is that we have to have some agreement with each other, you know, so that we're not sabotaging each other in certain respects. For example, someone might get offered a gig at a particular place and they'll give a price, and the price is the price. But the venue owner might be able to find someone to do that gig for a lower price, or another band might come through, or another band leader might come through and say, well, I can do it for less than that, and give them that lower price, and then they end up getting the gig. And see, what happens when you look at things that way is that you're depriving another musician of the opportunity to get a fair price. You know, when you ask for a certain price, you factoring certain things in, you know. And what has happened historically in this city is that gigs have gone to the lowest bidder instead of the highest bidder, and it negates opportunity for a lot of other musicians. And it's just tragic to have to do all that work for so less. I think about my own situation, you know, talking about that gig last night, man. I had to give myself a nice stretch and, you know, do some self-care after a gig like that, because when I do a gig, and I'm sure you relate to this as a drummer, I have to move a lot of stuff.
I understand.
It's not just, you know, walking in with a flute or a saxophone in a case.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
You're moving metal, because you got cymbals and stands and pedals and all that other kind of stuff. You got drums. You got to move a lot of stuff, you know. And for someone to offer you $50 to play for 3 hours after you've taken all that equipment, put it into your vehicle, brought it to a venue, unloaded it, set it up, end of the gig, break it down, load it into your vehicle, and then take it somewhere else, and then take it out. That's a lot of work, you know.
Well, here's what I have to say to that, big bro. We got to be able to stand on business. And what I mean by that is that your price is your price. And if that means you don't perform out for a while until you can find the type of customers or communities that are accustomed to the price you're looking for, or even paying more. So, for instance, this might mean, you know, going to the west side of Cleveland to do some gigs because the clubs may pay more. Or this might mean, you know, working with an agency that can get you a certain amount of money. But we got to be willing to say, nope, I'm not going to come out for that. And that's hard, especially when we want to play and we want to share our gifts with the world. But we have to be able to stand on business. Now, I have two cousins who have clubs and bars. And with both cousins, and they know I love them, and I know they love me, they was like, you the only Negro that is charging this price. You know, everybody else is charging blah, blah, blah. And you the only one to come and bring a contract in. And this is my own family. I said, I can only speak for my company and how we move and the experiences we've had and what we're used to. If you can find a better situation, you know, I won't take it personal. We always family at the end of the day, but you got to be able to stand on business.
Yeah, and the business is the business, and the contract is something that is for your protection. You know, I mean, it
protects them too,
and it protects them too. But I'm telling you that I've had the experience of having an agreement with someone, which is in and of itself a contract, coming to do a gig
plus half down.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there was no offer of half down, so I commend you.
Well, no, they don't offer. We got to say, hey, I need you to Zelle or Cash at me half of that money up front. And usually once they do that, and I didn't mean to cut you off, I'll just say this real quick.
Yeah.
Once you do that, they're usually going to go through with it because they don't want to feel like they lost half of their money for no reason, you know, and they'll put some respect on you.
Mm.
But we got to be able to stand on business.
Yeah, I like that approach, bro, because like I'm saying, I had a contract with someone. It was a verbal agreement, and I'm not going to say who it was. Okay. But we got to the gig. We did everything that we were supposed to do. But this particular person was not happy with the fact that they didn't get as many folks in that room as they wanted to, and actually took money off the table. And those are the kinds of things that we have to deal with when we don't have that signed contract. So I really like that idea of getting a deposit on a performance. It's no different from being a photographer and, you know, shooting a wedding, and you get your deposit on the front end, and then when the job is complete, you get the rest of the money. It's business.
Absolutely.
And it has to be done that way, and it has to be done to protect yourself. And again, as you said, to protect the owner. So these are the
throw this in there too.
Okay.
When you're doing your contract, make sure that it has in your contract that I'm not a professional promoter. I'm not a professional marketing team. You know, we're not coming to do a concert at your bar, your club. Because even if you're Beyonce, you're only going to get 1 or 2 shows in Ohio, and nobody's coming to pay to see you again till next year. So if I'm going to do a concert, I'm going to do it at a theater or a big venue that we rented out, that we can pack this place out and make some real money. We're not doing it at a club or bar. A club or bar, you're entertainment. You're like a DJ. You know, like you're this is something that the club can advertise. We have these drink specials. We have a DJ this night, or we have a live entertainment. But, you know, this is not a concert, you know, and again, if we were doing a concert, we wouldn't do it at a bar or club. So, you know, it's your job as a club or as a venue to promote your own club, to let them know what specials or what what features you have here. That's not my job. You want to get a professional promoter or promotions team to handle that. That's not what I do. Now, I might post a couple times and let people know, hey, I'm going to be here, but that's not my job. And that needs to be a clear line drawn in the sand in your contracts that, hey, this is not our job. Our job is to entertain the people that already come here or the people that you want to bring here. And if you have a following, that's great. But again, we're not selling tickets. We're not in concert. Yes. You know, so the artist needs to, I'll say this, and I'm done. The artist needs to study the business more so that we know how to move. That's going to not only be in the best interest for us, but also be in the best interest for them. Because if you're looking for me to be a promoter and I'm not a professional promoter, you're going to come up short.
Yes.
But if you're just looking for me to come in and entertain the people that's coming to your club because you promoted it with your promotions team, I guarantee you they're going to clap their hands. And if they don't, you don't have to hire us back. But that's the only thing I can guarantee you.
Mm-hmm. I really do think the issue, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, there comes an expectation that as a performer, you're going to promote your own show. And it should be it's not
a show. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's not a concert.
Mm-hmm.
We're just entertainment for your club. We're just background music. We're not in concert.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to know the business. So when that type of wordplay is thrown out to the musician, they're not tricking you into doing another job you're not being hired for.
Yeah, because it comes with the expectation that you're going to do the promotion. And to your point, I think if that expectation is there, then that's an additional cost. You know,
there you go.
So
there you go.
You want me to promote?
That's all I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying. Pay me to promote. You know, other than that.
And then if we fill your club up, are you paying us more money?
Right.
You're not. Why? Because we're not in concert.
Yeah.
We're not getting the door ticket sales. Whoever feels if you got 10 people in here, you got 30 people in here, we still get the same pay.
Right.
So they can miss you with that if you know the business. But that's one thing that we have to take accountability and ownership for, is that a lot of times we're just musicians and we haven't studied the business, and then we want to cry when you signed your name on that contract or you made that verbal agreement because you didn't know what you were doing with your business.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to point to everybody else, and there's three fingers pointing back at you.
Right.
We got to stand on business.
Yes, the business of the business. And we're looking forward to providing education for the Cleveland musical community on these issues at some point in the very near future. And there's more to come on that. But I appreciate the perspective that you have lent to that. And we'll just continue that conversation and continue the momentum, because I think now is a time for change, particularly in light of the fact that there's so much going on in the funding world, but at the same time, we have energy in this county. For instance, they're planning to, and they're in the beginning stages of forming a music commission on the county level. And I think this is going to be an opportunity for us to put these issues on the table so that we can have some cohesion between performers and venues. Because other than that,
I love it.
The exploitation continues. You know, the masses get free music. The musicians walk away with half empty pockets, and you know, the only folks that are happy are the folks that sold a lot of liquor and sold a lot of food on any given night. So we'll move forward from that. Elijah, I neglected to mention the fact that you have experience touring nationally as a musician, and I want to talk to you about that musician life, and also talk to you about this book that you've written. So we've got one final segment before we get into that, and I promise you we're going to give you an opportunity to talk about both. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM, Cleveland's urban alternative. Back after this.
Attention listeners, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, is now streaming on iHeart Radio. We are the same community radio station with the same mission, now with another way to bring you the content you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can still find us on WOVU.org. and still listen to us anywhere on the free WOVU mobile app. Those are not going away, but you can also find us on iHeart.com and on the free iHeart Radio mobile app. However you choose to listen, keep it locked for the latest content as we continue to provide a platform for you, the best audience in the land, right here on WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. I'm speaking with Elijah Gilmore, who has dropped quite a bit on us in the past few moments. Definitely opened my eyes to a few things to consider as we navigate this course of being a musician and also being a venue owner. You know, I'm wearing both hats, so I see it from both sides and I understand both angles of it. And I am very hopeful that we will be able to do some things to create some equity within that paradigm. But we're going to shift gears and talk to this gentleman about his time on the road with none other than Gladys Knight. Brother, what was it like for you to be involved in that situation?
Oh, she's a beautiful person, beautiful spirit. You know, sometimes, you know, when people get to the level that she's accomplished, you hear of, you know, superstars being divas, and she's just down to earth. She's like your grandmother. You know, she'll even cook for us, and she's just a sweetheart. Was a joy to work with. Of course, musically, that was, you know, beautiful as well. You know, to work with a living legend, and I'm grateful for that experience and what she's contributed to our world through her music. You know, a lot of people know she's another one that started really young with Motown as a little girl. She, you know, she's been doing music all her life. And I just took notes, and I just watched how she was able just to be cool with everybody. But at the same time, she was able to stand her ground too for her music. Like, so for instance, like if we would be in rehearsal and if something she didn't like, she would definitely stand her ground and say, no, I don't want it like that. I want it like this. And so as sweet as she was when it came to her music, you know, she could change hats.
I have a Gladys Knight memory, Elijah. We were at the Holiday House downtown, and this is quite a bit ago. It was probably back in the 80s, but
okay.
I shot Gladys Knight in the Pips at the Front Row Theater, and I had from my perspective, I had these great pictures of Gladys Knight and Bubba, right?
Bubba.
Yes, and I'm right in the elevator with her, and I'm trying to sell her those pictures, and she wasn't the least bit interested. And I think I held that against her for a long period of time, but I finally got over that, you know, because
you said you tried to sell it to her.
I tried to sell her some pictures, man. This is me back in my 20s. I was a very young man back then.
Okay,
and I wanted to sell her. You know, come to think of it, I've been in the elevator with some very interesting people. I once rode an elevator with Tiny Tim. I once rode an elevator with Jack Lemmon. This is out in California. In Detroit, I rode in an elevator with Liz Wright, Diane Reeves, and Angelique Kidjo.
Wow.
A few years later, I was in the elevator with Esperanza Spalding and Terry Lynn Carrington.
Both my girls. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That last elevator ride, that was the one.
Yes, it was. And it was funny, too, because Esperanza was just bubbly and cheery and everything. Terry was behind us. She could care less. But I had occasion to meet Terry Lynn last month when she was here for her concert with the CJO, and she's a beautiful person. So I'm not casting dispersions on her, and she was kind enough to grant me an interview as well. So love Terry, love Esperanza, and I love Gladys Knight too. I have a great memory of traveling across country back in the 70s. My dad had a 73 Monte Carlo with an 8-track player in the dashboard. And he didn't have that many 8-tracks, but he had this 3 8-track collection of Motown's greatest hits. So I'm listening to Gladys Knight, and I'm listening to her version of Heard It Through the Grapevine. And I liked her version better than I liked the other version. I think Marvin Gaye did it. But I liked Gladys's version because James Jamerson was playing bass on that record. And I just loved his playing. How was it that you were able to connect with her and become a part of her band?
So the band leader, who's Leon Turner, is a good friend of mine. He's actually my little brother. And throughout his journey as a musician, usually I would call him for gigs around the area locally. So when he got the gig and the position opened up for percussion, he, hit me up and said, "Hey, would you like to play with Gladys?" And I took it because I'm like, this is a major opportunity. And he didn't have to do that, so I'm grateful that, he was able to spin back around the block and show some love towards me. It doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes you look out for people and they're not always in a position to, reciprocate, but he was in the position to, show that love to me, which I'll always be grateful for. And that's how I got the position.
Okay. Well, a lot of times it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. In this case, it was what you knew and who you knew, and you 5 years on the road with a living legend. That's quite an accomplishment. You have also accomplished writing a book. It is called The Book of Eli, Elevating Your Life Through Emotional Intelligence. Tell us about that book.
Okay. So that book was written so that we can share with the world the importance of how emotional intelligence can better your life. So I have an organization called the Tribe of Eli Movement, and we teach the community emotional intelligence by way of the arts. And one of the things my manager said, "Hey, when you're doing your different programs, which we have camps, and sometimes I go do public speaking. He's like, you need to have a book with the information that you're teaching so people can take this with them." So that's what inspired me to finish the book.
Okay.
And so what we teach, for instance, emotional intelligence in itself is being able to be aware of your emotions, why you feel the way you feel, and a healthy way to regulate those emotions, a healthy way to deal with conflict, developing your communication skills, understanding psychology of people. And I said, why are they not teaching this in school? We learn math, science from elementary to college. And most of us are not scientists. The issues that we deal with in the world have to do with how we relate with each other and interact with each other. Why is this not being taught in schools? And after I thought about it long enough, I said, okay, if we teach emotional intelligence, then, that's going to work against racism. That's going to work against sexism. That's going to work against hating anybody that's different than you. So I said, I get it. They couldn't teach this. That means the people at the top would have to take accountability and look at themselves in the mirror. So I get it. Even now in 2025, we're afraid to incorporate, diversity, equity, and inclusion into the school systems. In 2025, it's still a fear. So I said, what could I do, or what can we do? And I thought about passing a law called the Heaven on Earth Act, which we're still working on. But I said, in the meantime, what can I do to be proactive so that we can get this information out to our community. Now, I got hip to emotional intelligence from going to counseling with one of my girlfriends. And, the first lesson they taught us was how to listen better. So they had a game called the mirror game. And you're supposed to reflect in the mirror what you think you hear the person saying. So one person has a microphone, which is like a brush or comb. One person has the mirror. They said, tell Elijah how you feel. And, she tells me how she feels. And I try to reflect or tell her what I think I heard. And she says, that's not what I said. And I had a big smile on my face. And I looked at the counselors. I said, y'all heard her, right? They said, Mr. Gilmore, that's not how the exercise goes. She may not know how to say it the right way. She may not speak like you. Your job is to figure out what she's trying to say. I said, oh, wow. They said, ask her to repeat it again. She repeats it. I said, is it A plus B? She says, yeah, it's almost there. It's not everything. And I'm slapping my head at this point. They said, Mr. Gilmore, you cannot hold the mic until you can figure out completely what she's saying so you can respond in a correct way. Actually repeat it again. After the third time, I said, is it A plus B plus C? She said, yeah, that's it. And I'm squinting my eyes and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's what you were trying to say. And they said, Mr. Gilmore, you cannot tell her what she was trying to say. You have to trust her and believe her at game face value. And if you can't trust her, then you just maybe need to get out the relationship. But that taught me the art of communication from a listening standpoint, which also falls under emotional intelligence. So I said, you know what? Everybody needs to have this info. This is crazy why this is not a core elective or, this is not something like math and science that we learn from elementary to college. And so just something in my heart, whether you want to say it, God, the universe, something was like, Elijah, I know you view yourself as a musician, but how about you use your platform to get this out here? And so that's when I started the Tribe of Eli movement, trying to teach our world emotional intelligence by way of the arts.
Fantastic. So if folks are interested in getting the book before it comes out, in an advanced situation, they can actually get an e-book or an e-copy of it.
Yes, on Amazon.
Okay, so it is The Book of Eli, Elevating Your Life Through Emotional Intelligence. It is available on Amazon.com. Sometime in the near future, it is going to be a physical book that you can actually put in your hands and flip pages, and we'll look forward to that. We just have a few moments before we go. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience in terms of things that you have coming up? And I can also say you'll be at Larchmere Arts on May 30th, so we'll put that out there right now. But any information you want to share in terms of them reaching out to you?
Yes, you can go to ElijahGmusic.com, which is my website. That should have any current dates coming up, as well as you can follow me on Facebook under Elijah Gilmore. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Elijah G Beats. It's also Elijah G Beats on TikTok as well, and I usually post my shows. And I also want to tell everybody out there that we should keep hope. Change comes slowly, but when we have faith and we're dedicated, anything is possible. As my mom used to tell me, anything is possible. If we believe it, we can achieve it. And as you can see, we've come a ways from early America. We're not where we want to be, but because people believed and didn't give up, now look where we're at. And we still got a lot of work to do, but don't lose hope. I also want to say that we're one human family. What happens to a white woman happened to me. What happened to somebody in Japan happened to America. If we need to start looking at ourselves as one human family, and we need to realize that if we cannot look at it like that, then there's a serious threat of us self-destructing. Everybody has bombs, and we need to get to a place where we can operate as one planet. And that's the Tribe of Eli's motto, by the way: one planet, one sound.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to us continuing to get stronger as a human family, and keep hope alive.
All right. One love, one family. Thanks for joining me today. And for those of you who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.